Hey, welcome to the Healthful Woman Podcast, the fastest growing podcast in women's health. Today's Monday, November 18th, 2024. Gabrielle Moskovitz returns today. As you learned last week, Gabrielle is a therapist who specializes in maternal mental health. Last week, we got to meet her and learn a little bit about who she is, and we got to hear the first part of her birth story. Today, Gabriella is returning to tell the rest of her birth story, as well as how her own experiences impacted her professional life as a therapist. A few reminders: The Unexpected, which is the book I wrote with Emily Oster, is available wherever you buy books. Second, you can continue to please email us questions you have for our mailbag podcast. You could send them to hw@healthfulwoman.com or go to our website and click on the link that says send us your questions. Reminder, these are for mailbag questions, not your own personal medical advice. For those which you might need answered quickly, please ask your own doctor. All right, thanks for listening. See y'all next week.
Welcome to today's episode of Healthful Woman, a podcast designed to explore topics in women's health at all stages of life. I'm your host, Dr. Nathan Fox, an OBGYN and maternal fetal medicine specialist practicing in New York City. At Healthful Woman, I speak with leaders in the field to help you learn more about women's health, pregnancy, and wellness. All right, Gabrielle, welcome back to the podcast. Last week, for our listeners, or 30 seconds ago for me and you, we heard about the beginning of your story, who you are, what you do, and your first 4 pregnancies. Again, your 2 children and your 2 miscarriages, and with your son Caleb, sort of the more eventful pregnancy. And when we left it last week, you and me and Jake, we decided you're coming to the city. You're going to be seeing us.
Correct.
We're taking care of you. We're going to make this happen. And we just had a this is in the story, had a very, very long conversation about the plan for this pregnancy. So what was your mindset going into this pregnancy? Did you feel very terrified? Did you feel very confident? Did you feel very sort of like, how am I going to do this logistically? Like, what's going on swirling around in your brain at that time?
So a lot of different things. I would say, again, the main feeling was anxiety. Like when I had my first miscarriage, I was like, okay, like it was really, really bad, but I was like, I feel like everyone has like one miscarriage. So I was kind of able to process that. And when I had the second miscarriage, I'm like, no, you don't get struck with like 2 bad luck. So this time I was like, there's no way I could have a third, but maybe I could. Like there is a higher incidence rate with women with PCOS for miscarriages. So I did come in to your office like anxious every time I had a scan. I also was trying to like get over my fear of driving into the city. So logistically, it was definitely difficult. But now I'm not scared to drive to the city. So that's
look at
positive.
That. We cured something. All right.
Exactly.
A little what do you in the biz call this? Exposure therapy?
Exposure therapy. Exactly. I did it on myself. So that was a good part. But I remember like being in your office and like meeting with a bunch of different doctors and saying like, even if this all goes wrong, I'm in the best possible like place to deal with it. So that definitely gave me reassurance. Every doctor I met was compassionate. Everybody like was really, really good with my anxiety. They were pretty reassuring. And so I just felt like I was in good hands. So like no matter what the outcome would be, I knew I would be taken care of.
Well, that's nice. How did Jake feel about all this? Because he's a doctor and we're always, skeptical of other doctors.
He was like, I think at first he was like, why are you schlepping to the city? Like, that's crazy. But then he's very economical. So he was like, oh, they're tier 1 insurance. They're in the Mount Sinai network. Yeah, definitely. Let's go to them. Especially when he found out that our birth would be, I think, $100 total. So he was like logistically on board once that happened. And he also, I think he
baby,
knows,
just Uber to the city. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly. Spent all the time on the Ubers. He met you on that first consultation. And I remember when we left, he said, like, you have to go to him. Like, this is the doctor for you. Like, you need somebody that you could, text or call. Like, I almost felt like I had like a concierge medicine service with you guys, or specifically with you, Nady, where I remember like texting you, you would answer like within like 10 minutes. Like, I just felt like I always had that support, even when I wasn't physically in your office. And so for me, that like, he saw that and he saw that I was handling the anxiety a lot better. And so he was like, this was absolutely the right decision for you. And especially there came a point in the pregnancy when like they found that I had like higher levels of fluid. And I remember I was at the appointment by myself and I just called Jake and in 10 minutes he walked over. So that was also like made it the right decision.
Yeah, no, it did work out sort of coincidentally that your prenatal care and delivery were like right where he was. Cause like you said, when you're a resident, you're always busy. You're doing like it's crazy, but to be right next to where he is, he could, run off and, go and see you and come back and didn't have to. It would have been harder for him to do that if you were in New Jersey, ironically.
Exactly.
Ironically. Go figure. So how'd the pregnancy go? I know the answer to all these questions, but our listeners don't.
Very eventful, I would say. It wasn't eventful in the beginning. I would say around 14 weeks. I think you guys recommended that I get the diabetes test early because I do have PCOS. And so we did the test and I didn't think anything of it. I never had diabetes in my other pregnancies. I knew people that had it, but it just wasn't even in my mind. And I remember Jake and I were away. We went away upstate New York and we got a call from Dr. Shalansky. And I'm like, this is not good when doctors call you. And the reception was so poor. So I could barely hear her. It was breaking up. But what I did hear was I'm so sorry, but you have gestational diabetes. And I was a wreck, as you remember. I was like, but what do you mean? If I failed the first hour, why can't I just take the 3-hour one like everyone else? And it was a fight. With all of you guys, I remember I was trying to advocate. I'm like, I can't have diabetes. Why? And I did end up doing the 3-hour one, but it was still your practice's recommendation for me to be treated like I had diabetes because of the size of the baby. The baby was measuring 99th plus percentile. And also because my ultimate goal was to have a VBAC. And so you really, really were trying to let me have that goal happen. And so we treated it as though we did have diabetes and I had to do the finger pricks every single day, 3 times a day. And I ended up having to also do insulin shots at night because my fasting levels were still high.
Was that troublesome to you logistically or more sort of just accepting the fact that you had another diagnosis on top of all the other stuff that's going on with you?
I think at first it was logistically because I'm kind of squeamish. I don't love blood.
Exposure
so
therapy, baby. Another one.
Yeah, exactly.
We cured
that was really hard.
You don't like needles? How about you stick 6 of them in you a day? All right.
Exactly. And the shots were also kind of freaky. Uh-huh. But I think what you're saying is, I think for me, it was I can't catch a break. I finally get pregnant naturally and then I have a miscarriage and I get pregnant naturally a second time and there's all these complications. So that was really frustrating. Yeah. I think that part was definitely harder for me.
Yeah. I mean, as I recall, I probably was trying to spin it that okay, right, yeah, it kind of sucks that you have this, but on the other hand, since we know about this, we can control your sugars and the baby won't be huge and you'll have a higher chance of a VBAC compared to sort of having your head in the sand with this. This is going to end with a positive thing, start with the negative, end with the positive, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that worked, but that's the spin. I mean, it's true. It's not, I'm not trying to sell you something, but it's true. Listen, you'd rather not have it, but if you have it and you could be totally on top of it, you're going to likely prevent something that's going to lead to not having a VBAC.
Exactly. So that was when I was really upset about it, I would just kind of try to envision the word VBAC, which sounds weird, but I would just try to envision that having this baby vaginally, and that sort of helped me get through all of the annoyances of having diabetes. And yeah, that was complication number 1.
I guess we never actually touched on this. Why? I mean, I know the answer, but why was VBAC so important to you? Because it was obviously you're not nuts. You would have had a C-section if you needed one, but why was VBAC such a big goal of yours in that pregnancy?
I think it was because I had a vaginal already. I think it's different if you never had a vaginal and you had a C-section. I knew what the vaginal recovery was like. I was up and at it 3 days after Noah's birth. I was fine. I recovered really well. And a part of me also again, I have this issue with control. Mm-hmm. And so I felt I couldn't control the C-section. This baby was taken out of my body mm-hmm. without my not like without me doing anything. I like the control aspect of like, I have to push when it's a vaginal delivery. Like I'm sort of in the driver's seat in a sense. And so I think for those two reasons, like VBAC was so important, but it was also like, I had 2 little kids at home and like, I couldn't do like the C-section recovery again, knowing what it was like. I didn't have the time for it, I would say.
I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, both of those are interesting. Definitely, the recovery with a successful VBAC is easier than C-section. I don't think your C-section recovery, had you needed one, would have been as hard because it probably would have been scheduled. It was a little bit different than showing up bleeding and in labor, all this. Okay, but I think that the interesting thing, the control aspect, and listen, this is, your world. You talk about control with people every day, obviously. It's really fascinating because if you think about it, you had this loss of control with your delivery and you're trying to sort of like regain control with your VBAC. But in order to do that, the exact same thing had to happen. You had to lose control in getting this diagnosis of diabetes and then take control of it by, when you have diabetes, you're checking your finger sticks 4 times a day and giving yourself insulin. It's like perfect for people who love to control the situation. It's like this like back and forth, this like push and pull of like losing and regaining control. Wow, I never actually thought of that parallel. I like that. It's pretty cool.
I feel like you could be a psychiatrist because that's pretty deep.
We call it in our business gynecology. There's a lot of that goes on in our world.
Totally.
Fascinating. All right, so here we go. So you got the diabetes, you're doing the finger sticks, you're doing the insulin, we're going for VBAC.
We're going for VBAC, and then I hit like I think it was like around 24 weeks, and everything was fine, and I hit like the 24 week. I went in for an ultrasound, and they said that there was high levels of amniotic fluid. So I got called into the doctor's office and sat down with me, and she started honestly with like all of those bad news that it could be. So I was told, high fluid can indicate musculoskeletal issues with the fetus where they might have trouble swallowing eventually. Or it could also be that you have diabetes and that the baby is getting more sugar. And so their baby is peeing more and there's more urine. And so there's more fluid. But of course, like being told the bad news first, like I was harboring on that one. And I remember being in shock and I'm like, another thing, like why? So she told me, you're just going to have to come back like weekly ultrasounds. And I'm like, great. I haven't been to the city enough. Like I need to get like a parking garage by your office and move in basically. And I called Jake immediately and was like hysterical. And I said like, you need to come meet me. And that's why it was so great because like, I think 12 minutes later, he was in the office and we met with another doctor upstairs who was super reassuring, Dr. Bender. He was awesome. And he was very, very chill about the situation and sort of said like, it makes sense that you have this because of the diabetes. Like it often goes hand in hand. And I also remember calling you that evening and I'm like, Dr. Fox, can you please talk me down, talk me off this ledge? And you're like, yeah, that's my job. I'd love to. And you did. And you were also pretty reassuring about it. But it was just hard because it was like another thing and another diagnosis and like another reason that I had to come to the doctor like once a week. So every week when I would go in for the scan, I would be like nervous. And then they would say, there's still high fluid. It's a little less. And then by like maybe 5 or 6 weeks later, it resolved actually. And the fluid was back to normal. So that was great.
Which makes sense because the diabetes was also better controlled by that time.
Right.
Because you really, it takes some time to get those sugars and the effects of the sugars sort of out of your system. So all good.
Yeah, all good. All good.
All good. Everything's going great.
That was the end of, I think that, oh, no. Actually, then one more thing happened. The baby kept measuring big, like 99 plus percentile. And I remember like around 34 weeks, I went in for my weekly ultrasound and the doctor that came in, she actually didn't even come in. Like somebody had called her on the speakerphone to like go over the ultrasound results. And she said to me, the baby's really, really, really big still. I think we're going to have to do a C-section. And I obviously like panicked. I called you. I drove straight from your office to a jewelry store and bought myself a bracelet because I was like, I'm having a C-section. I need a present. And I'm wearing it right now.
I deserve this.
Yeah, I deserve this. So I was distraught. And I remember speaking to you about it, and you said like, listen, like you're the topic of our like you're one of the patients that we're talking about at our next like meeting with all the doctors. Like we're gonna really go in depth about it, and like I'll keep you posted. And you did. And I think around like 36 weeks, we had an appointment with you, and you said like, let's do this. Like, let's do the VBAC. Like, let's try for it. And that was one of the best days of my pregnancy. And I just felt like I could breathe again. And like, hopefully there's no more hiccups in this story.
Right. It's interesting. It's almost ironic because, when to deliver someone is a very complicated topic, and you're balancing not too early, not too late, whatever. But because of your prior delivery with the abruption at 36 weeks, one of our big fears is that's going to happen again. Because, thank God you had a healthy baby, but abruptions could be a real disaster. And so it's always, even if you didn't have the diabetes, we were going to be watching you very closely because of that. And so what do you do with someone who has a history of an abruption? When do you deliver them? Do you deliver a little bit earlier? Do you wait and see if it happens? And there's no one way to do it, but one of the very legitimate strategies is once you get to 37 weeks to deliver the baby. And you don't normally deliver at 37 weeks. It's slightly early, but that's one thing. But for you, it almost worked to an advantage, because if we deliver 37 weeks for that reason, it sort of is helpful to try to VBAC because the baby's 2 weeks smaller than it would have been if we waited to 39 weeks, is what we typically do for diabetes. So it's almost like, all right, your baby's measuring big, but it's going to be 2 weeks earlier. So it's going to be like a pound less, give or take. And it almost like all finally fell into place for you. I was like, this may actually be perfect. You'll have like a big baby, but not too big. And we'll deliver 37 weeks, and it probably will work out well. So it's, had you not had the abruption, it would have been harder to justify delivering you 37 weeks versus 38 or 39.
So all the stars align, basically.
Finally, you get time to catch a break, Gabs.
Exactly.
So, all right. So tell me how the induction and delivery went. Was it at that point was it very nerve wracking during the induction because you don't know how it's going to end, or you're sort of like, all right, I'm here. It is what it is.
It was unbelievable. I would say I never been like induced in that regard before. Like they inserted a balloon into me and they tried to dilate the cervix. The doctor that I chose the induction with, shout out to Dr. Melka. She was awesome. She kept on checking on me. I was there for about, I think the whole process took about 12 hours once the balloon was inserted.
Right. She did our VBAC. She did the VBAC podcast, so she's an expert.
Oh, I didn't even know that. So she was just, her vibe is so chill and calming. And she was like, you ready to have a VBAC? And I'm like, yeah, I actually am. And I think once I was induced and I had my epidural, I was like very zen. Like I love epidurals. And I was like, you know what? I'm in the best possible hands. So like, hopefully it'll work out. And I remember trying to fall asleep at a point. And then I woke up and I'm like, I feel like there's something coming out of me. I felt something. And so I paged the nurse, and at first I was like, oh, it's 1 a.m. I don't want to bother the nurse. I don't even know what I'm feeling. And I was like, just go back to sleep. So I tried for 15 minutes, and then I was like, no, something is coming out. So I paged the nurse. She came in and she was like, whoa. The baby's head is crowning. You got to hold it in, lady. Dr. Melka's in another delivery. You got to wait. And then the resident came in and she checked me and she was like, don't do anything. Just try to keep it. And they grabbed Dr. Melka eventually. And I think it was maybe 3 minutes of pushing and the baby was out. And it was my easiest delivery by far. The baby almost, it's essentially, he's slid out of me.
Yeah.
And he was my biggest. He was 8'11".
At 37 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing we didn't wait till 39.
Exactly.
A 34-pound kid. No. Oh, wow. That's amazing. So it must have been, I know the answer to this question. It must have been pretty cool after he was born.
It was unbelievable. I was it was everything I wanted in delivery and more. She was cheerleading me on. We were laughing. We were making jokes. The resident was great too. And it felt so chill. And after having such a tumultuous pregnancy and just journey to motherhood, I felt finally something was happening the way I wanted it to.
How do all of these experiences, good, bad, and ugly, color your professional life as a counselor for maternal mental health?
I think it just shows me, and I think it's not only in my professional life, like you really don't know what other people are going through. Like you can see me like with my 3 boys who are like 5, 2 and 8 months. And you could think like, this girl had it so easy. Like she has 3 little kids. Like you would never know on the outside of like what people are going through. You would never know that I went through 2 losses. You would never know that I went through like pretty challenging pregnancies or placental abruption. So I think it also put things into perspective for me, not just as a therapist, but as a person, that like, don't judge a book by its cover. And just because somebody has like multiple kids, like they might have done IVF, they might have had like losses in between. Like you just don't know what people are going through. And so I think it made me a more compassionate person, and definitely more compassionate and empathetic towards my clients, because I was in some of their shoes. And so while I wasn't quite in the like infertility category, I do understand what it's like to go to like a place and have like morning monitoring, because I did that. Even though I never did the steps, I understand what it's like to go at 6 a.m. to get your blood drawn every 2 days. So I think it also helped me like empathize with my clients and just with people overall.
Do you, in your counseling, bring in your own stories? I mean, some people do, some people don't. Some clients appreciate it, some people don't. You know what I mean? Like how do you sort of navigate that?
It's a really good question. So that's like all about self-disclosure. And like there's so many different opinions in therapists, like whether we should bring it up or not. What it comes down to is if it's for the benefit of the client, then we should self-disclose. But if we're just self-disclosing because like it feels good to get things off our chest, that's not appropriate. So it depends on the client. I'm very open about my journey, meaning like I have on my Instagram account, I tell my story about pregnancy loss. I write for like the local Jewish newspaper. I'm submitting an article again about my pregnancy loss. So like if you're in this community, you know what I've gone through. If you Google me, like it'll come up. So I think I often self-disclose at a point, not the graphic details, but more just to like show the client that I do understand what they're going through, but at the same time, I have to be a little bit careful, because I had a client, for example, that went through a pregnancy loss and like it didn't affect her as much. Like she was fine, and that's okay too. Everybody experiences it differently. So just to make sure to be careful to not project my own like emotions of what I went through onto the client. So that's like, that's challenging, but I think it also helps me see that like there is no one way to react to all these things that go on in your life. Like some people are okay with things and some people have a harder time handling it.
Yeah, no, I think that's wise. And it's tough to know what the right thing to do is. And it can sometimes backfire, where you do disclose something and they didn't want to hear it, or you don't. And they're like, wait, why would, like, I didn't know this happened to you. Like, why you, like, what are you hiding from me? And it's tough. And because also you're dealing with, people in the throes of emotions, and that's not always, as everyone knows, it's not always rational. It's just this is how people feel. When you're like on a day-to-day basis, if you're doing maternal mental health, like what are the things you're talking about the most? Like what are the topics that come up the most, or the themes, or, just from a prevalence perspective in your practice?
So a lot of it is, I would say number one is like postpartum anxiety or depression. And so, 1 in 5 women experience some kind of anxiety or depression after birth. And so that definitely comes up a lot. And so we're working on like strategies and coping tools to handle those diagnoses. And another thing that I'm very, very big in is self-care. And self-care has this like buzz term now on like line that it's like, make yourself a bath or go get a manicure. That's not like what I believe self-care is. So I teach my clients like what I call real self-care, which is like making boundaries, putting yourself first, saying no to things that you don't want to do, not going to a social event because you just don't want to, or carving out me time every single day. And so I think as moms, it's really difficult to juggle it all. Like a lot of us are working, we're taking care of the house, we have little kids, we're like helping, do all these things in the house. And so we need to make sure to prioritize ourselves and to allow like time for for just us. And so that's something I really, really work on my clients with. And clients will will take out their calendar and will literally write 15 minutes of me time. And that's doing whatever you want. You can do a workout video, you can take a walk, anything that you enjoy doing. And the third thing I would say, which is sort of along those lines, is making sure that you have your own identity other than a mom. So while I'm Noah's mom, I'm Caleb's mom, and I'm Avery's mom, at first I'm Gabrielle. And that's really, really important because it's easy to lose yourself in the craziness of motherhood and the chaos. But at the end of the day, you have to be who you are. And so I think those three things come up really, really often with my clients.
That's amazing. How do people find you?
So they find me on my website, collaborativemind.net, and they can also find me on my Instagram account at The Chef Therapist.
Gabrielle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast 2 weeks in a row to talk about your story and about what you do. Obviously, it's a joy knowing you and being a part of your journey, and also now professionally, we're in the same world. So there's a lot of overlap. Yeah. And then, we all know the same people as well.
Exactly.
But really, no, thank you. I appreciate it. This is important stuff. And these stories are important for people to hear and to understand, and sort of the lessons that we all take from them. And it's not easy to tell your story to the world. And I appreciate that you took the time to do it.
Of course. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Healthful Woman Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, please visit our website at www.healthfulwoman.com. That's HEALTHFULWOMAN.com. If you have any questions about this podcast or any other topic you would like us to address, please feel free to email us at hw@healthfulwoman.com. Have a great day. The information discussed in Healthful Woman is intended for educational uses only and does not replace medical care from your physician. Healthful Woman is meant to expand your knowledge of women's health and does not replace ongoing care from your regular physician or gynecologist. We encourage you to speak with your doctor about specific diagnoses and treatment options for an effective treatment plan.